My name's Jacob Vernick. I'm a sales engineer here at NewBlue, and welcome to Discover Captivate, a brand new webinar series from NewBlue. Thank you so much to everyone here for hopping on today. My name is Jacob Vernick. I am a sales engineer here at NewBlue, and welcome to Discover Captivate, our twice monthly webinar series where we spend some time walking you through how to use our software if you are new to it or if you've been using it for years. We try to keep it as much for the new user as much as the old user. We hope there's something for everyone in this webinar. If you haven't already and you would like to follow along, please feel free to download a free trial. There are links on our website. We can also make them available in the chat for you. The focus of today's session is going to be a couple of little nuances, I guess, specifically to sports. So we're going to be talking a little bit about one feature we called text variable translation, how you can use that to display timeouts in your graphics. We're going to talk a little bit about creating custom animations depending on specific actions. So if something happens, how can we trigger that action in Captivate to animate on and then animate off? And then lastly, a little bit of design, creating our own custom graphics. I do want to be kind. I know we have audience who may or may not be doing sports here. We've got, I know Scott said government meetings, so I will spend some time in kind of our lower thirds and our different data integrations as well. But having said all that, again, feel free to follow along. This will be posted to our YouTube channel afterwards if you have to hop off at any point. And at the end, we'll do a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please, you can put them in the chat as we go, and then I will get to them at the very end of our session. So without further ado, let's dive in. There. All righty. So last week, if you were here, if not, not to worry. This was the scoreboard right here that we were designing out. Just a little score bug in the bottom right-hand corner. And then today we're going to spend some more time just adding a few different elements to this controller, to this scoreboard. However, welcome to Captivate, right? This is our live graphics platform that allows you to use templates, create custom graphics, and basically be your live CG platform for anything that you are looking to do. Captivate is supported on both Mac and Windows. We sell both software and hardware. It's just a matter about picking the right poison and finding what works for you. What we're looking at right now is a pretty normal setup that you might have while you're getting set up for your production, right? So on the left-hand side over here, we have our project panel. This is where all of your graphics in your project are going to live. So if you have lower thirds, if you have, in sports scoreboards and stat graphics and all those different elements, they will all live in your project panel. You do have the ability in Captivate Broadcast and as an add-on to some of our Captivate Sport and Present to add additional channels. So if you wanted unique outputs going to maybe different destinations, or just to have the ability to switch on and switch off from a single button on your switcher, you can send them out on multiple channels as well. Right here, we've got our preview window. This is where we can see all of our graphics before sending them live. We can also do some basic transform movements to them. And this is also where we can link up all of our data sources. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then over here, we have our program monitor. Right now, we're set up for 1920 by 1080. Send it out 5994. Captivate Broadcast does go up to 4K. The other two versions, Present and Sport, are capped out at 1080. When we're sending out graphics, we support a few different versions, NDI, HDMI. We can send out SDI if you have a Blackmagic or AJA card hooked up. We'll send out the key and fill directly into your switcher. The option not listed here, but that is also available, is a direct integration into Blackmagic ATEMs, so we can send graphics directly into their stills library to be updated. There are a few other things that we can do over here when we're talking about actually building graphics. Down here we can create graphics from scratch, bring in After Effects compositions. Captivate can also be used as a playout server, so Captivate Broadcast supports media sequences. So if you wanted to build out a commercial playlist or just other videos that you might have or images that you want to play in a row, Captivate Broadcast has a media sequencer, again, available as an add-on for Present and Sport. We have transition effects. You can also bring in your live audio and video if you wanted to create 2 boxes, 3 boxes, etc. But that's a lot of the different ways we can create graphics. However, for many people who just want a turnkey, something out of the box they can use, they will go into our template. So if you come up here to the library, we have again, Sport and Present, 500 different graphics templates. Captivate Broadcast has over 1,000 different templates, and it just depends on what you are looking to do. So maybe you wanted to do more of a meetings workflow, right? This has lower thirds, 2 boxes, contact information, backgrounds, title screens, all those sorts of things. I'm partial to the cubic. I like this one a lot. It has bugs and full screen graphics and transitions and social and polls. And if you hover over any of these graphics right here, you'll get a little preview of what it's going to look like in your project panel, and you have the ability to update all of the data for it. We have tons of different sports graphics, and if none of these kind of tickle your fancy, well, today's webinar is actually primarily focused on how do we come in and design our own graphics, right? This scoreboard we built mostly in our last webinar, right? This was all built custom, not based on any of our templates, just kind of using some inspiration from different graphics that we've seen out in the wild lately. And today we're going to talk about a couple of other elements as they relate to this graphic. So I'm going to come into our title designer now, which is where I am able to customize all of the individual elements. And you can even see right away, right? All of these different layers. Everything in Captivate in this title designer. We want it to feel familiar like other programs that you've used before. To me, it feels kind of similar to Adobe. But you have all your different layers where you can adjust the length, you can change, you can add transitions, you can keyframe, you can do whatever you need to do to make the graphics work the way that you want them to work. Okay, so we have our scoreboard right here, right? And I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this graphic so we can maybe see it a little bit better. I can use this guy down here to just kind of drag my way around. And what we have here, we've got some text layers, right? We've got the score, the amount of fouls, the clocks. Last week we talked about how to take the number 1 that might be coming from your data source and then use what we call text variable translation to change that 1 into a first, right? So if you come over here to this motion and data tab, you can see down here, if I'm receiving the value in of 1, the value out that Captivate displays should be first. Same with 2.5 for halftime or 6 for final, right? All the way through, depending on the data in, we can do something different on the way out. Now, another example of when we're going to use this, and you might not think about it maybe the most obvious way, but another way that we're going to use this is for timeouts, right? So if the value that is coming in is 1, I want to show a single M dash or underscore or something along those lines. So just to give you a general idea of how we would build this out, I'm going to come up here to add text, and I'm going to add variable text. The difference between static and variable text just means I want the ability to change this on the fly, right? Or excuse me, static text means I'm never going to change this, right? An example might be maybe this will always just say fouls. You're never going to need the ability to change it. Great. It's static text, done for, forgotten. You never need to update what it actually says. However, most of the time, if you're doing something like a lower third, if you're doing something like a score in a scoreboard, you need that text to update, right? And timeouts is a great example. And when we're building out our timeouts, I'm just going to use some dashes right now, right? So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to add these to my scoreboard. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that I can get a little bit closer. And I'm just going to kind of put these down here, right? I think in most high school sports, I think you get 5 timeouts, or excuse me, most high school basketball, I think you get 5 timeouts, but don't hold me to that. So we can put this right here, and you can see this does very visually represent the amount of timeouts that we have. I'm going to move the home score up a little bit. I'm just doing that by using the arrow keys on my keyboard, but you could always drag and drop. You could always come over to the motion and data tab and kind of just click on the arrows and move it up and down however you want to. Now, we've got this right here, and I'm going to increase these guys a little bit over here. Let's get the spacing looking better. Okay. And now the last piece of what we need to do is telling Captivate how to interpret this information, right? I'll center it as well. So we're going to come back over here to motion and data, and we are going to turn on text variable translation. And what we are going to say is if the value is 0, well, they don't have any timeouts. I don't actually want to show anything, right? If the value is 1, 1 dash. 2, 2 dashes, and then all the way down the line, right? So we'll go up until we get to 5 dashes. And if you look at any of our scoreboards, maybe it's a circle, maybe it's a dash, maybe it's something else. We're always using this kind of methodology to actually display that information, right? So if I come back over here to this global tab, this is where I can see all of my different variables. It's the moment of truth now to see if I type in 1, I get 1 dash. If I type in 2, I get 2 dashes, all the way down the line, right? So as long as you can anticipate the different values that you are getting, you are able to show that, represent that visually however you want. So you would just copy and paste this and do the exact same thing for the home team. And now you would have your home timeouts and your away timeouts. If I right click on any layer, I can just rename it so that when I am looking at this graphic later and I forget everything that I did, I can really easily just come in here and rename it. So none of this has any animations on this graphic yet, but we're not focused too much on animations right now. We're going to talk about those a little bit more later. But the next thing I want to talk about is something that we call in Captivate a visibility variable. A visibility variable means if the data has a value, if it says 1, that means we should play this graphic on right now. But if there's no value at all, we don't want to be showing this graphic. And a great example of when we're using visibility variables and if you're watching sports at home, if you see something that we would call a visibility variable would be when a player maybe has a 3-pointer, right? There's going to be some sort of custom animation graphic that the team is going to show when a player hits a 3. And my favorite one that I've been seeing lately, I'm going to import a graphic that kind of looks like it. And I am, we're taking some ideas here from how the professionals are doing it. But I'm going to come over here to File Import, right? While I was showing you many ways that you can just use create custom text, and maybe you can see up at the top right, you can add shapes and add audio, you can also just import files directly into Captivate. So if you created something in Photoshop, if you created something in After Effects, and you have an MOV file or a PNG file or something along those lines, you can just import that directly into the title designer and use that as one of your assets. So I'm going to come over here to import, and I'm going to bring in an image. And what we're going to bring in right now is this little 3-pointer. Somebody hits a 3. I think Mikal Bridges gives that celebration a lot, where he just gives the 3 fingers, and that means I hit a 3. But now we're going to want some animations to this, right? So we're going to want the ability to say, hey, when the player scores the 3, I kind of want this to like fade up, and I want it to grow a little bit and cover the score. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to put this on our scoreboard, and again, we're going to zoom in. And for this one, we're going to talk about a couple things. This is where we're going to spend a little bit of time on transition effects right now, right? So if I come over here to this arrow, if you're following along at home and you don't see this arrow, you can come up here to View and go to Library, and that will show you this arrow. We're going to kick out this window, and we can go to Transitions. And this is where our whole library of different transition effects live. So if you wanted to fly in from the right-hand side, if you wanted to flicker on screen, you're going to find all sorts of animation effects right here. So you can click on animations right here. So again, if you wanted it to fly in, if you hover over it, you'll get a little preview of what that's going to look like, right? So now we can kind of see what it would look like if it were to fly in. Excuse me, yeah, use this falling letters. If I wanted to use this, I just drag and drop it on the layer that I want to use it. However, this isn't the transition I'm looking for. I actually want to do something a little bit custom. And if any of you have used After Effects Premiere, you're probably very familiar with keyframing, right? So Captivate does support manual keyframing. So if I wanted to come in here, and I'm going to make this actually like super small, and maybe we'll rotate it a little bit, right? So I'm going to just rotate it to here. And this is maybe where I want it to start. And you know what? I'm just going to add, for good measure here, a fade in as well. So we're going to have this fade on. So again, transitions, animations, fade, and then we're just going to drag and drop that fade. So now it's going to kind of just fade on right there, but I want it to kind of grow. right? So I am going to come back over here to my motion and data tab and say turn on keyframing. And by default, that automatically sets a keyframe right here at wherever your cursor is at that point. My cursor is right at the beginning. And now I want it to animate up to the pause point. The pause point is a crucial concept in Captivate. Basically, what it lets you do is this is where your graphic is going to freeze when it hits the screen, right? So you can imagine this score bug is going to animate on, and then at some point, it's just going to stay. And the pause point is where you are telling our graphic to stay. So when somebody hits a 3, I want the ability to, let's expand this out. Let's rotate it back here. Maybe we'll make it a little bit bigger and drag it down. So we could do something like this, right? Maybe something kind of like that. So when a player hits a 3, it's going to animate over the score graphic, and we can get a little preview of what this looks like just by going like that, right? So I'm going to maybe make the fade a little bit shorter. Something along these lines, right? You can do this with any MOV file, any PNG file. If you have custom things that you want to make and trigger when some specific action happens, all of that is available to you. I'm going to add a little bit of an outro animation as well. I'll throw another fade onto the outro, drag this down, and then I'm just going to set another keyframe out here by going back to motion and data and clicking right here on this plus, and we're going to set another keyframe that is just going to be, again, this small guy, so it'll kind of shrink back in. So the last piece of this kind of concept is, well, now I need the ability to know when there's a three-pointer. Well, hold on. I want to move this over just a tiny bit. There we go. Oh, well, that added another keyframe. Silly me. So I'm just going to come in here and subtract that keyframe. And now I've got my keyframe where I want it to be. So nice little add a keyframe, subtract a keyframe if you make a mistake, all living over here in the motion and data tab. Again, on a per layer basis. So everything, if you want to adjust just this one layer, it's only going to adjust this one layer. All right, so the last piece of this, how do we trigger this, right? So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to rename this graphic. I'm going to call it away three-pointer. And now I'm going to come down here and make this a visibility variable. And we're going to tie this up to a data source in one moment so that we can make sure that it triggers. But basically, I could give it a name right here. But this is just what data that I'm using either internally or externally should power when I trigger that graphic, right? So I come over here. I'm going to click the check mark right there to save it. There's a few different ways to trigger this any visibility variable. Number one, right here, I have this visible checkbox. Again, that is just based on the naming convention that I gave, the name of the layer within Captivate. So you can just name it if you want. I can uncheck that, click on play, and now when I check it, it's going to animate on. And when I uncheck it, it's going to animate off, right? But maybe we want to automate that a little bit, right? We want to come into the score and we want to say every time I send a scoreboard update, I want that to update, right? So I can come over here to this scoreboard graphic that we built, and now I can tie it to data. And this is one of the biggest powers of Captivate is the ease of tying any of your graphics to data. So if that's a lower third, maybe that's a Google Sheet or an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV file. You can tie any of your lower third graphics directly to those and have a list of 100 names within one graphic. You don't have to build out the graphic 100 times. You build out one graphic, 100 names, and you just choose which name wants to go live. For sports, I can come over here to add source, go to sports, and now there's a ton of different ways that I can bring in sports data, right? We have integrations with hardware scoreboards like Daktronics, Fairplay, OES, Tissot Varsity, and Whiteway. We can pull in directly from partners like Scorebird, Sportscast. We can ingest the StatCrew data format. But if you don't have the luxury maybe of having all of those, you can come over here to the scoreboard tool. And these are Captivate's own built-in scoreboard tools to keep score yourself. So if I come over here to scoreboard tool and then basketball, that is going to hook up the basketball scoreboard tool directly to my graphics so that now I can keep score. I'm going to come over here now to link data, and I just need the ability to tie this piece right here, visitor 3 points, to my graphic. How I'm going to do that? Well, I do have the ability right here to kind of drag and drop things. So if you ever want to link up data, you can come over here, and we'll use this as an example. Visitor score, I can come right here, drag and drop that onto visitor score. I can come right here, do the same thing for home score, just drag and drop that onto home score. And now when I'm updating my scores in Captivate, I can send it. I guess the visitor score didn't take, but I've got the home score working right here. It's going to send the updates right there. Now let's do the visibility variable. Another way you can change the data is within the title designer itself. So now if I click on edit and I go to this away three-pointer graphic, I can go over here to motion and data, back down to our visibility variable. And now from this dropdown, everything that you just saw in that preview panel that is a data source for our scoreboard tool can now be assigned to a value. So if I come over here and I say assign this to visitor 3 points, I can click on the checkbox. And now every time that my visiting team has a 3-pointer, you probably do it first for the home team and then second for the away team. But every time the visiting team has a 3-pointer, we'll wait for this to render out. You're going to see that animation go, right? So play, visiting team 3-pointer. It's going to animate that graphic on, and then it's going to animate that graphic off. So that is the concept of a visibility variable. There are so many different ways that you can use that, right? In hockey, when a team scores a goal. In football, when a team scores a touchdown. In basketball, when a team dunks, right? There are so many different types of ways that you can build out custom visibility variables that trigger based on specific actions. And if we don't have an action that it triggers on, that's not a problem. You can just click right here on this checkbox and trigger it yourself, or trigger it for something like Companion or a Google Sheet. There's so many different ways to trigger a visibility variable. The last thing I want to talk about a little bit here is we're actually going to quickly create a graphic from scratch, right? We kind of took a graphic that existed for the beginning of part of this, but now we're going to build a stat graphic from scratch. And the graphic we're going to build is one that I've been seeing a lot of in sports lately. It's kind of a stat graphic that slides out from the back of the scoreboard and then slides back in, right? So it's just basically taking this right now they're two separate graphics, right? So it just gives us an easy way to be able to quickly and easily have a very modern, a very kind of cohesive graphics package where the stat graphics are playing off of the scoreboard, is playing off of the locator, and all these graphics are kind of are communicating and being a part of something together. So the way that I would think about building this, I'm going to start by duplicating this graphic, right? And the reason I'm going to do that, I'm going to rename this and call this our stat graphic. The reason I'm going to duplicate it is because I actually do need to know where the scoreboard is to be able to build this graphic, right? So the scoreboard is an essential part. So I'm going to bring this back into our title designer. And now, just because I'm not actually going to use the scoreboard as part of this graphic, I just need to know where it lives. Just to clean up my timeline a little bit, I'm going to click on this top layer, shift click, and then click on this bottom layer. Oh, I guess my shift isn't working. Well, you know what else I'll do? I'll just highlight all this. And now I've got all my layers highlighted, and I can just control and group them. So now I've got all my graphics grouped right here together so that I don't have to, my timeline is much cleaner now. I'm not actually ever going to be touching this. I just need it to be here so that I know how to build out my graphic. All right. What we saw in that graphic, right, where we had a rectangle, that was kind of our background. We had an image on the left-hand side. That's just going to be a headshot that I can quickly swap in and swap out. And then I had two text layers, right? So how would I think about building that out? Well, the first thing I'm going to do, let's get the background going. So I'm going to go up here to add shape. We're going to add a rectangle. And we're going to come down here and kind of position it where we want it to be. Move it, make sure it's the right size. And then we'll drag it out to maybe about here. All right, that's our background. We'll change the color in a little bit. Next thing we're going to do, we want that image. And when you're adding an image, my recommendation is always to actually add a shape first. So you come over here to rectangle. We're going to add a rectangle, move this kind of into the other rectangle. And I'll show you how quickly and easily we can kind of just make this an image. So over here, we have the ability to change the color. We can make it into a gradient, or we can say, hey, this box, I want it to be the container for an image or a video. So I'm going to click right there on image and video, and it's going to launch, my Finder, and I can come in here and say, hey, I want this guy to be the image. But maybe I don't always want this guy to be the image, right? Maybe he's not the one having the great game today. Maybe it's me. Probably not, but you never know. I can click right here on variable, And making something variable is just going to allow me to update it quickly on the fly, right? So I can come in here and say, you know what? From that other window, I just need to swap out my image. Or I want to tie this to a Google Sheet where I have the file path to all the images I need. And I just want to quickly select what player is I'm going to show this graphic for. So I'm just going to name this stat graphic headshot. You can name it whatever you want. It's just for your own sake at this point. All right. The background, I'm also going to make this more of a gradient. So I'm going to click right there on gradient, double click right here, and that will launch our colors window right here. And I will just kind of build out my gradient. So I can come over here with the color picker. I'll make this my top color. Actually, I'm going to make this a 3-color gradient. I've been using those a lot lately. Drag this up to the top. Down here at the bottom, I'm going to use this darker orange. And then maybe in the middle, we'll use like kind of a light orange to make it kind of like, yeah, that's good enough for now. And you can always, play as much as you want with these kinds of things. It kind of reminds me of a creamsicle right now. Uh, but all right, I've got my background. I've got my headshot right here. Now I need the text, right? So I'm going to add the text layer. We're going to make this variable text. I'll just make the top layer my name. Over here, there's all sorts of different types of things you can do to the text. We've covered these a lot in previous webinars, so I won't spend too much time on them. But, I can change the font. You can upload custom fonts and use those as well. Can change the font size. And the last thing I'm going to do right now is, well, I'll make it all caps. And then I'm going to come over here and say that I want this to be fit text to box. That means no matter how long the text is, it will never exceed the size of the orange box that I have kind of built around it right here. I'm probably just going to make this a little bit bigger. And then I'll center it as well and change it to black. Okay. Now we got the name. Now we just need to add the text. So maybe this is going to be what the actual stats are. How you build out this second level of text is going to depend on what your goal with it is. If you want it to be maybe tied to stat crew graphics or something like that, you're going to want to build out multiple different text fields so that you can tie the right stat to the right area. So you could say, I want stat one to be stat. I want my first text box to be the stat. I want my second text box to be the stat label. I want my third text box to be a second stat. You can design it however you want. You could also maybe make it a message that you send custom. So if you wanted it to just be one line, I'll just call this message for now, and we'll do the same kinds of fonts and centering and size and color. Whoop. Ah, there we go. And we'll just drag this down to here. And again, we're going to fit text to box. Drag this over here, drag this over here. And now no matter how long my message gets, it's never going to exceed the size of these boxes. All right. One last thing I'm going to do is also just, these look a little offline to me. So I'm going to command click on both of these layers. And now I can come up here to align objects, and I can define how I want to align them. So I want to align their centers. And now both of those graphics are lined up perfectly. All right. The last piece of this, how do we make this animate on? How do we get this graphic to fly behind the scoreboard and then come on, right? Well, I know I want it to fly in from the right-hand side, so I'm going to come into our transitions, and we're going to start by selecting fly in fast right. We're going to choose rectangle 2 right here so we can get a little bit of a preview of it. And when I hover over it, you can see it's not exactly what I want, right? It's covering up the scoreboard. It's not doing exactly what I need it to do. I'm still going to add it to this rectangle for now, and I'm going to add it to this rectangle for now. All of these transitions do have things that we can customize about them. So if I come over here to this transition and I click on fly in, I can say, actually, the smoothness, I want it to be smooth, right? I don't want it to fly in as fast as it's flying in right now. I can do the same thing right here. If I was smarter, I would have probably just added this transition one time and then come in here and just copy pasted it onto the other graphic, right? So I'm going to have these two guys fly in at the same time. And then I'm going to have the text once these guys kind of fly on and find their spots, which is right around here. this is right around where I'm going to have the text start. So I'm just going to move the text layer. This is the duration right here, just by adjusting this. So it'll kind of fly on and then the text is going to come on. However, the piece we still need to solve for right now, how do we get this graphic over here? How do we cover up this area? The way we're going to do that is with a mask, right? I imagine many of you were ahead of me on this one. But if I come over here and I just kind of cover up this area where the scoreboard is, and I'm going to actually hide everything but my mask and my scoreboard right now. So these eyeballs just toggle visibility. I just want to make sure I see the whole area that I want to kind of hide. I'm going to come over here. Now in effects, there's a ton of different effects that you can use, as you can see from this drop down right here. But the one we're focusing on right now is going to be the mask. And this is close to what I want to do, but this is actually the opposite of what I want to do. So I'm going to click on invert mask. Now, when my graphic is going to animate on, we can see right here, it doesn't start animating on. Well, we have to wait for it to render out. All right, there we go. Well, I did this earlier too. You have to turn on all your different visibilities right here if you want your graphic to work. So now, when we kind of scroll through, you can see it doesn't start until it reaches outside the scoreboard. The scoreboard area does not exist in this transition anymore. I just covered it up with the mask, and now my graphic is ready to go. The only other thing I wanted to do is maybe add just a quick transition to our text. The one I liked a little bit was kind of having it type on. So it's going to type this text on left to right. Same thing right here. It'll type the text on left to right. And then we can click on that down arrow, see our transition effects, and just change the length of them. I'm not going to bother too much right now with animating the outro, but it's the same concept. You would just come over here and say you want it to fly back off. So you would just drag it to the end of the graphic. And now you have your outro animation. Okay. Now let's see how it looks. Click on this check right here. That's going to save your graphic. Everything over here in the project panel is hierarchical, meaning anything on the bottom is going to be shown below anything on the top. So if there were elements covering things up, I could, if they were below them, I wouldn't see them, right? If this graphic was completely hidden behind the scoreboard, I would never see it. But now we turn our scoreboard on, and now we've got our stack graphic flying out, typing on. One thing I was saying earlier, maybe you wanted this, the scoreboard tool to power the message right here, right? Well, now I click on play, and I can come over here into my message and say, hello, and send this live. And now we can get that typed onto the screen for a custom duration, however we want to do it. Play this graphic off, and voila, we kind of have a stat graphic growing out of our scoreboard with an easy ability to kind of control how it works. So that's my 30-minute spiel for today. Hopefully you learned a lot. Keep an eye out for you on YouTube for any of these videos. There is a whole library of maybe 10 to 12 of just these webinars, in addition to probably the 50 other videos about how to use Captivate, all available on our YouTube channel. So that is a fantastic resource available to you as well as you are trying to learn more about how to use this software to its fullest potential. Yeah, thank you so much to everyone for joining us, despite the amounts of snow that you may have. It's a good excuse, it's a good reason to stay indoors and join us on this webinar. But thank you so much for joining. We really always appreciate you guys having here and being a part of this. We'll talk soon. Thanks again. Bye-bye.